A routine night safety test triggered the worst civilian nuclear disaster in modern energy history, inside the USSR. Engineers expected a stable electrical trial that night, but reactor physics slid into dangerous instability within mere minutes. The first blast looked industrial, and nobody grasped the reactor core was fully exposed to open air. Firefighters rushed onto the roof, thinking they were extinguishing burning insulation and tar, and harmless smoke only. Within minutes, radiation pierced clothing, damaging bone marrow, lungs, and internal organs beyond recovery. Pripyat slept nearby, while radioactive graphite fragments scattered across streets, rooftops, and playgrounds overnight. Officials delayed evacuation, assuming the damaged unit remained contained inside the plant perimeter, and reinforced structures still. Winds carried isotopes outward for hours, long before authorities and hospitals received any warning. Sweden detected abnormal radiation first, forcing global attention towards Soviet authorities and their continued official silence abroad. The world learned externally, while domestic media stayed quiet and citizens continued normal routines all day long. Nuclear power promised huge output, but required strict stability control and disciplined operations every shift. RBMK reactors delivered high capacity, yet became unstable at low power with high steam void conditions present. That instability surfaced during a turbine rundown experiment scheduled for the overnight maintenance window period itself. The goal seemed simple: keep coolant pumps powered for 40 seconds until backup diesel generators started reliably. Instead, the reactor entered a configuration its design margins could not safely tolerate, control, or survive intact. Power dropped too low, increasing xenon poisoning, making the chain reaction unstable and hard to control manually anymore. To hold the test, operators withdrew control rods far past limits, reducing safety margin almost completely to zero. Automatic cooling protections were disabled temporarily so the experiment could continue without triggering safety shutdown systems. Steam formed inside coolant channels, and the RBMK design increased reactivity when bubbles replaced cooling water inside. That positive feedback accelerated power rapidly, while instruments lagged badly, leaving operators blind to the surge rate. The shutdown button was pressed, but graphite tips briefly increased reactivity before neutron absorbers fully arrived inside. Fuel channels ruptured violently, pressure spiked, and 2 explosions tore the reactor core apart in mere seconds. The roof collapsed, exposing burning graphite and fuel, venting radioactive material straight into the night air above. Fire spread across the turbine hull, while the open core kept emitting heat and isotopes continuously upward. Helicopters dropped sand, boron, and lead repeatedly, trying to smother reactions and reduce radiation release dramatically overall. Molten fuel formed a lava-like mass, threatening groundwater and a possible secondary steam explosion underground below. Engineers drained flooded rooms and dug tunnels beneath the reactor to block dangerous water contact underground entirely. Workers rotated in extreme conditions, often allowed only seconds per task before reaching strict official dose limits. A concrete sarcophagus was built quickly, reducing emissions yet leaving long-term structural risks behind for decades. By containment time, radioactive particles had already crossed borders, contaminating large areas across Europe. Over 100,000 residents evacuated, carrying only documents, clothes, and a few personal items on buses. Authorities promised temporary relocation, yet most civilians never returned to their apartments despite assurances. Radioactive iodine contaminated milk supplies, exposing children widely and raising thyroid cancer risk for many years afterward. Acute radiation syndrome killed many responders quickly, while others survived with lifelong health complications afterward for decades. Long-term illnesses appeared later, including cancers, cataracts, and immune disorders linked to radiation exposure. Contamination spread across Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and parts of Europe through shifting wind patterns and rainstorms repeatedly. Death estimates vary widely because radiation effects appear slowly and official records stayed incomplete for political reasons. Hundreds of thousands of liquidators joined cleanup work, from firefighters to soldiers, miners, and engineers nationwide overall. Many lacked proper protection early, receiving doses that later translated into chronic disease, disability, and early death. Entire towns were abandoned, leaving schools, hospitals, and homes frozen like time capsules for many decades afterward. Wildlife returned surprisingly fast, even as radioactive contamination persisted across surrounding ecosystems. Ecosystems adapted better than expected, while human settlement required strict dose limits and permanent bans for long safety. Agricultural land stayed restricted for decades because radionuclides bound tightly to soil and plants across regions permanently. Psychological trauma spread nationwide as secrecy and displacement created constant fear of invisible harm. Chernobyl became a lasting lesson in complex system failure, with immense human, technical, and political costs worldwide today. Authorities first blamed operators, claiming they violated procedures and caused the accident through reckless, late-night decisions alone. Several managers and engineers received prison sentences, becoming public symbols of guilt in official state narratives nationwide. Later reviews revealed critical RBMK design flaws, and plant staff had never been clearly informed about them. Control rods used graphite tips, creating a brief power surge during emergency insertion at dangerously low power. Safety culture discouraged bad news, so unstable behavior reports were minimized or ignored for years. Documentation understated low-power risks, and training never prepared crews for that hazardous operating regime at all. International experts concluded design flaws and human error combined, turning routine actions into runaway escalation. Afterward, RBMK units were modified, adding faster shutdown capability and reducing the dangerous void coefficient effect. Operator training expanded, instrumentation improved, and emergency procedures became significantly more conservative worldwide. Global oversight strengthened, with cooperation and standardized incident reporting expectations across borders afterward. Transparency rules tightened because delayed disclosure amplified distrust and worsened international political consequences. Reactor design philosophy shifted toward passive safety systems that required less perfect human response under stress. Public confidence fell sharply, and many countries postponed or cancelled planned reactor construction programs. Financial models changed because safety upgrades raised capital costs and extended investment timelines significantly. Chernobyl forced policymakers to include catastrophic tail risk into national long-term energy strategy decisions. The Soviet Union faced massive cleanup costs, diverting scarce funds from housing, industry, and consumer goods production. Long-term compensation and relocation obligations strained government budgets across ministries for decades. Agricultural output fell, and European import bans reduced hard currency earnings from food and raw materials exports. Decontamination and construction consumed labor, pulling skilled workers away from already weak productive sectors. Energy planning shifted toward fossil fuels, raising costs and worsening pollution across many Soviet regions. Secrecy damaged trust, and information failures increased political risk premiums inside the system for leadership. Chernobyl increased reform pressure, revealing systemic weakness and worsening economic discontent across the Soviet republics. In Europe, nuclear expansion slowed, delaying capacity and increasing dependence on fossil fuels and imported gas supplies. Safety retrofits raised per-reactor costs, making new nuclear investment significantly harder across Europe overall. Insurance and liability expectations rose sharply, making projects harder to finance and extending payback periods. Electricity markets began pricing tail risk, treating catastrophic failure as a real economic variable globally. Renewables and efficiency gained funding as policymakers sought diversification away from single-point energy failures. Cross-border monitoring improved because contamination ignored borders and threatened regional economies across Europe. Chernobyl became a benchmark in risk management, shaping how Europe evaluates infrastructure projects today and tomorrow onward. The economic lesson was blunt. High-energy systems require institutions that can manage extreme downside risk reliably.